Welcome to the Life with Joey Calvo Podcast. I'm Joey Calvo. Please continue to help the victims of the Texas floods and the California wildfires. They still do need our assistance in rebuilding. And today we continue our series on Septemics with Jim Marshall. So Jim is going to explain the axioms of Septemics. And so, Jim, welcome back to the podcast as always.
Hi, Joe. Good to see you.
Yes. And so I'm going to have you start off reviewing who you are, and then you'll jump right into what you need to discuss about the axioms.
Okay.
So it's all yours.
Okay. Well, I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I developed a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics and published it in the book, Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. Today, we're going to discuss the axioms of Septemics. As with every science, it has axioms. It has 12 axioms. And for those of you who are not familiar with this, an axiom is a fundamental truth upon which other truths are based. So the axiom does not really need further explanation. It's just a statement of scientific truth. So I'm going to go through the 12 axioms, and this is noteworthy in a couple of reasons. For one thing, the axioms are not in my book. So they are, however, posted on my website if you want to follow along or see them, but they're not in the book. So this is a way to get access to the axioms and hear how I came up with them and how they're explained. So axiom number 1 of Septemics reads, Septemics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to human beings occur in a sequence of 7 levels. Now let's go over this. Philosophical comes from the Greek word for love of wisdom. Philosophy is a word created by the Greeks, which means love of wisdom. And science comes from the Latin verb scio, which means I know. It's the strongest word we have. It's stronger than I understand or I think or I believe. It's I know. So a philosophical science is what we're dealing with here. And basically my discovery was that there are 35 septemic scales, each of which has 7 levels, each of which explains a whole area of human phenomena. It's very easy to find out about this. If you go to septemics.com, there's a lot of information on the website. So that's axiom 1. Any questions, Joey?
No.
Okay. Axiom 2. Septemics comprises a collection of scales or sequences, each of which breaks down various human phenomena into a hierarchy of 7 steps. So I have taken these 35 areas, which between them span the spectrum of human experience, and found that each of them, by direct observation, has 7 levels. So you can go into an area of your life or someone else's life, and you can very easily analyze it because it has 7 levels. So for example, the scale of basic purposes. Every human has one of 7 basic purposes. There are no exceptions. Every person is at some level on every scale. So when you find your basic purpose, it is a life-changing moment. It greatly clarifies your life because you know what you're about. You throw out the other 6 and you live at that level. You can, of course, try to get up to the next level, but that is not an easy scale to move on, and that's explained in the book. Any questions?
Nope.
Okay. Axiom 3. Septemics is based entirely on natural phenomena and empirical observation. So the way I discovered this was that I worked for 40 years as a human development engineer, using engineering tactics, strategies, devices, approaches to help people, individual people, attain higher levels of competence, intelligence, enlightenment, responsibility, whatever the person was seeking. And I started to notice as I was doing that I could predict the outcome of the session. I never told that to anyone, but I made notes. And as the decades rolled by, it became clear to me that the client would be at a specific level on a specific scale. And as a result of our interaction, he would go up to the next level on that scale. And that happened many thousands of times. And each time it did, it verified my hypothesis, because the clients had no idea whatsoever how I was doing what I was doing, or what ideas were behind it, and what my techniques were about, what I was doing with biofeedback, et cetera. They had no clue. All they knew was they came to me with a problem or a situation, and I helped them resolve it. So that made it very powerful information, because there's no placebo effect and there's no power of suggestion. I simply observed what happened in the session and wrote it down. And eventually it developed into Septemics. Any questions?
None so far.
Okay. Axiom number 4 states, being at or near the top of any septemic scale and being at or near the bottom of any septemic scale is both a cause and an effect of being at or near the bottom of any other septemic scale. So basically what this means is, if you are high on a certain septemic scale of the 35 scales, that has some relation to your being high on other scales. There is such a thing as an upscale person or a downscale person. So let's say you take someone who is a drug dealer and a murderer and an alcoholic. That person is going to be at or near the bottom of all of these scales. That is why he is like that. The opposite is also true. If you have somebody like Jesus or Yogananda or Gautama, that person is at or near the top of all of these scales. So there is some influence between the scales. And the way this works out in terms of using it is, when you push yourself up on one scale, and of course you can improve yourself on any scale if you wish, there's a tendency to be improving yourself on other scales. It's also true when you see a person crash, he will fall down many levels on many scales at the same time. So let's say you know a guy, he's got 175 IQ, he holds a doctorate in physics, he lives in a mansion, and he's got a wife and 2 children. Well, one day, the wife and the kids go out for ice cream, and they're in a car accident, and they're all killed. The guy is crushed. He starts drinking. Because he starts drinking, he becomes an alcoholic. He loses his job. Because he loses his job, he can't pay his mortgage, he loses his house. So now you bump into this guy 5 years later, and he's a homeless person living on the street, panhandling quarters to buy cheap whiskey. What happened with that person is he fell down many scales. He did not just fall down one scale. So when you see a person crash like that, that's what happened. He fell down maybe 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 scales and winds up at or near the bottom of many of the scales. Any questions?
Nope.
Okay. Axiom 5 states, in moving from one septemic level to another level on any septemic scale, one can only move to an adjacent level. It is impossible to skip a level. Think of it this way. If you're on the 1st floor and you want to go to the 5th floor, one way or another, you have to go through the 2nd, the 3rd, or the 4th, whether you take the stairs or the escalator or the elevator. So if you are, for example, at level 3 on a certain scale, you can either move to level 2 or level 4. There are no other possibilities. Now, sometimes you go through a level quickly or easily or without noticing it, but still you went through the level. Now, this is actually useful data because let's say you're at level 4 on a certain scale. If you want to improve yourself, the only way to do it is to go to level 3. That is your only option. If you go to level 5, which is going down, you're getting worse. So what that means is you target yourself for the next level up and ignore everything else. So this makes improving your life a very controllable, predictable thing, which is news to most people. Most people do not have anything like that. They just sort of flounder around. Any questions?
Nope.
Okay. Next, Axiom 6. Whenever one correctly identifies someone as being at a particular level on any septemic scale, one has a consequent realization and is pleased with the result. So, for example, let's say a guy's having trouble with his mother-in-law, not an unusual situation. So he sees that she's always trying to control him and his wife. So he says, I'm going to look at the scale of control. So he knows the woman because she's been in his life for 5 years. So when he studies the scale, he's going to be able to spot her on that scale and say, oh, I see, she's at level 6. Now, a person at level 6 on the scale of control is what is commonly referred to as a control freak. This person has to tell you what to do, even if it's none of their business, which is obviously not a good thing. So when that happens, he'll have a realization, say, now I see what's going on with her. And that's why she did this and that. She can't help herself because she's at this level. Now, the next time he interacts with her, it's going to go better because he understands what's going on. He sees she's at this level. It is a fact. And he's empowered by that fact. So the fact that one has a realization when one spots a level, whether it's yourself or another, is the basic benefit of septemics. So let's say you don't know where you are on the scale of attack. So you look at the scale of attack. Oh, I see where I am. That explains why I did this and this and this, and why I couldn't get along with Fred. See, that's a consequent realization. And when that occurs, you will be happy with it. So one of the ways that you know you found the right level is that you have a realization and are happy with the result. If you find a level and nothing happens, you found the wrong level. So this gives us what we call a virtuous cycle. So the more septemics you use, the smarter you get because you're having realizations. The smarter you get, the easier it is to use. The easier it is to use, the more you want to use it. And the more you use it, the more realizations you have. So with septemics, the sky is the limit. In other words, you just keep using it and using it and using it, and you get smarter and smarter and smarter, and there's no limit. If you live 1,000 years, you will still be able to use this material to improve yourself, because new people and new situations will arise, and you can use the book to spot where they are, or to spot where you are relative to them or relative to your situation. So this is a very beneficial thing. And the fact that you have a realization makes this inherently therapeutic. So I know for a fact, I'm not going to go into it here, although I have in some other presentations, septemics definitely undercuts depression and anxiety for very specific technical reasons. But in the context of this axiom, anytime you have a realization, that is going to tend to undercut any depression or anxiety. Oh, now I see why I can't get along with my wife. See? So whatever anxiety you have is some of it is going to be relieved by that. So the more you use this, the less anxiety and depression you have. So it brings about a very beneficial and pleasant way of life. Any questions?
Nope.
Okay, next axiom. Axiom 7 reads, every septemic scale is unique and exists independently of any other septemic scale. So what this means is you cannot infer anything about scale A by studying scale B. These are independent. And when you study them, you'll see that. The mechanisms are different. In some cases, very different from other scales. And the fact that every scale is unique enables septemics to span the spectrum of human experience. Many readers have said to me after reading this book, you've covered everything. And the reason it covers everything is you have 35 separate slices, separate axes upon which to measure a person or a situation. And so because the scales are unique, they're not versions of the same thing. It's very powerful information. So let's say you have a relationship. So you look at, you analyze, let's say, your spouse on a particular scale, and you have a realization. Now you're a little smarter and you feel a little better about it. Then you go to another scale, you analyze it, and you will have a completely different insight because it's a different axis. So if you know anything about psychological tests, they have axes, like the famous MMPI. It has axes. It has 10 axes. So you might score high in one axis and low in another axis. And that's what psychologists use to help get a profile of a person. So this is similar, where you can get a profile of somebody, whether it's yourself or another, by finding your level on every axis. And each one of those will give you a realization about who you are, or if you're analyzing another person, who that other person is. Any questions?
None.
Okay. Next. Axiom 8. Every septemic scale has an inherently mathematical structure. That is how I discovered this. I should tell you, I took 26 semesters of math and loved every minute of it. So I have a mathematical mind, and when math appears, as is true for many engineers, we see it. It's there. So very often when I look at something like a rabbit running by or a rock going up in the air, I see formulae. That is not just a random act. There are physical formula that correspond to these things, and that is what science gives us. Science gives us the formulae, and then engineers take those formulae with the relevant facts in order to construct a workable thing, which is what I did with septemics. So I discovered these scientific facts, and then I used them to build a machine called septemics, which is for the use of anyone who can read English reasonably well and wants to improve himself or others. So let me read it again. Every septemic scale has an inherently mathematical structure. Mm-hmm. So the way this came about is I had been collecting this information for decades. And in 1995, I had this one scale that by then I absolutely knew was correct because I had been using it for decades. It had 6 levels. So I was trying to assess one of my clients against this scale and having a terrible time. I couldn't do it. Then I said, wait a minute. There's another level. This scale has a 7th level that I had never seen before. I realized I was discovering this as I was going along. So at some point, I had never seen any of these levels. So when I saw this level, it explained everything. I understood the client perfectly, and it was clear to me where to fit it into the 6-level scale. And when I did, that scale at that moment went from being a line, which is what a scale is, to a plane, meaning a whole body of data. And all of these mathematical data jumped out at me without my having looked for them. That is a mathematical manifestation. The whole point of math is you start with a formula or an equation and you coax data out of it. So you get down to the end and you say, oh, that's what that is. You get an answer. That's how Einstein found E equals mc squared, by using that same process. So the fact that this is inherently mathematical makes it natural law. This is not based on anybody's opinion. I just stumbled onto it, and because I saw that it would be useful to people, put it in a book so that people could have it and use it. Any questions?
No.
Okay. Axiom 9 says, when a person is at or near the top of any septemic scale, it is because that person is insightful in that area. When a person is at or near the bottom of any septemic scale, it is because that person lacks insight in that area. This has several major consequences. First of all, if a person lacks insight in that area, he's going to have trouble with that scale. So if a person is very low on a particular scale and you show him that scale, he's going to have trouble understanding it, especially if he tries to assess himself. He won't be able to figure out where he is on that scale, because the cognitive dissonance that he has that causes him to be at the bottom of that scale prevents him from being insightful in that area. That's why he's at the bottom of that scale. Mm-hmm. So if you find some guy who's a high school dropout, who does drugs, who's unemployed, who has never read a whole book in his life, and you give him this, and you show him some of these scales, it's just going to be gobbledygook to him. Mm-hmm. Because he's clearly not insightful. That is why his life is a train wreck. If he were insightful, he would be at a higher level and he wouldn't have all those characteristics. He wouldn't be doing drugs. He wouldn't be a high school dropout. He wouldn't be unemployed. He would be a successful person. So the successful people are the ones who are at or near the top of the scales. And the unsuccessful people are at or near the bottom of the scales. So anytime you see a person who's having big trouble, you know he's going to be at or near the bottom of one or more scales. Not necessarily the lowest level, but close. So I already know from my really lifetime of experience with this material that fewer than 1% of the population is at or near the top of all these scales. That would be someone like Jesus or Gautama or maybe Gandhi. And something like 4% of the population is at or near the bottom of all these scales. Those are the dregs of society. Those are the people who wind up going to prison, being put into an insane asylum, being murdered in a shootout, dying of a drug overdose. Those people are at or near the bottom. So one of the consequences of these is septemics is of no benefit to those people. So if you see somebody who's like, let's say, a terrorist, right, who kills innocent people for whatever reason he has, right? It's not that he's getting paid for it like a hitman. He just doesn't like these people. He's going to blow up a bus full of children, okay? That person is at or near the bottom of many of these scales, and he's not going to get this. If you offer this person this book, he'd say, is it going to tell me how I can stay away from the CIA and the FBI? You're going to say, well, no. And he's going to say, well, then I'm not interested. But even if he did read it, he wouldn't understand it, which is my point, because he's at or near the bottom of these scales. The opposite is true for the top of the scales. A high scale person, a person who's at or near the top, will read this and understand it. He'll look at this and say, ah, now I see why I couldn't get along with Gertrude 15 years ago when we broke up. This explains it. It's because of X, Y, and Z. And you see, that baggage that he had been carried around about Gertrude for 15 years is now gone because he understands it. It's not a mystery in his mind anymore. What happened? He knows what happened because Septemics explained it to him. So this book is of great benefit to people who can read English reasonably well and want to improve themselves and others. And those are people who are fairly upscale people. Now, I should tell you, most of us are high in some scales and low on other scales. That is the norm. So you'll find some guy, let's say, he has his master's from MIT. He's the president of his own corporation, and he has $20 million in the bank. Okay, that person is going to be high on most of these scales. So he's going to look at this and he's going to make sense of it pretty easily. He'll be able to read and say, oh, now I understand why this guy's having trouble. He's low on this scale. He'll get that right away. So that is the whole point of Septemics, that every person is at some level on every scale, and you should spot yourself on every scale, and you should spot everyone in your life on every scale, and then you will understand yourself and those people very well enough that your life stabilizes. So, for example, let's say you have somebody who's a very upscale person, but he's in terrible physical condition, right? That means he's low on the scale of physical fitness. So you're not going to convince that guy to join a gym and take supplements and go for acupuncture, okay? He's not into it. He doesn't care. He's going to eat junk food and drink soda and eat pizza and sit on the couch and watch TV. He's not going to exercise, okay? He's too low on the scale of physical fitness. Now, if he's aware that he's low, you might be able to help him to spot that and help him move up to a higher level, and then he'll be in a better condition. But the point is, for example, I had a friend of mine. This guy was actually a rocket scientist, literally a rocket scientist. He worked on the largest rocket ever built in the United States. And he was one of the most brilliant people I ever knew, but he was not close to being a fitness enthusiast. I being one and he being my friend, I sort of tried to get him to be a little more health conscious, and he was too much for him. He was too far down on that scale. So I just understood, I'm not going to talk to that guy about those things. He's not into it. So, or for example, if you find somebody who's low on the scale of attack, if you're low on the scale of attack, you cannot be in the military or the police. You can't do it. Now, you might be able to find some administrative post, but if you're in the Marines or the Special Forces or an ordinary cop on the street, you have to be willing to attack. That's level 2 on that scale. Most people are not at that level. Now, you can try to get them up to that level, and it explains in the book how to improve yourself up the levels. But that's an insuperable barrier. I mean, somebody at level 3 is what we call a pacifist. A pacifist cannot be a policeman. They have to use force. They have to shoot people. So it's not a good job for a pacifist. So if you analyze yourself and you see you're at level 3, when you're thinking of going into the police, say, well, I'm not going to do that. That's not for me. So, any questions?
No.
Okay. Axiom 10 reads, utilization of septemics requires some insight, but also develops one's insight. So the benefit that you get from this is that it develops your insight, because when you correctly spot a level, whether it's you're on yourself or on another, you have an insight. Now I understand what's going on with this guy. So that you are a little bit smarter because of that insight. But as I suggested earlier, it requires some insight. So if you have a guy who's really dopey, he's not going to be able to use this because it requires some insight. So for example, if you look at yourself on a certain scale, where am I on this scale? You have to have some insight in order to figure out where you are. So there are people who lack insight. And so septemics is about insight. It requires some insight, but then it develops that insight. So you just have more insight and more insight and more insight. And because of that, your life gets better and better and better, because your ability to understand yourself and others gets better and better. And everything we do in industrialized society has to do with people. Okay, so you have a family and you have a business and you have neighbors. This is all people. And the reason you have trouble is because you don't understand people. Sometimes if you look at videos like on YouTube, you'll see people go into court and they insult the judge. They defy the judge. Clearly, those people don't understand people. Okay, there's a certain way when you're in court to behave. Generally, a lawyer will tell you, this is how you should behave in court. Some of these people don't even have lawyers, and they just go in there and make a horrible mess, and they make things much worse for themselves because they don't understand. If you understand people, you can develop a rapport with the judge. So, for example, I've brought suits against people, civil suits, many times, and prevailed, mostly without a lawyer, because I could develop a rapport with the judge. I could even develop a rapport with opposing counsel, because I understand people. And when the judge behaved a certain way, I understood what he was doing, and I could take that in stride and not have a conflict with the judge. And so it made it easy for me to prevail, because most of the lawyers, they know the law, but they don't understand people. And so they would be going up against the judge or insulting the jury without even realizing it, because they don't understand people. So this is really valuable stuff. Any questions?
No.
Okay. Axiom 11 reads, any human problem, difficulty, dilemma, or situation can successfully be analyzed by one or more of these scales, usually more than one. So the way to use this is, a guy's having a problem or a situation or a dilemma, and you get him to look at a relevant scale, and then he can analyze it, and it alleviates the condition. So let me be specific. Let's say you have this friend, Alex, and every time you see Alex, he complains about his girlfriend. Joey, I don't know what I'm going to do with my girlfriend. She's driving me nuts. She does X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
So after a while, you get tired of listening to this. So you say, Alex, come here, let me show you. And you open up the book to the scale of relationships. And you put it in his face because he can read English. And he'll say something like, you mean there's a scale of relationships? And you say, yes. This relationship that you have been complaining to me about for 6 months, where is it on that scale? And I guarantee you he's going to want to answer that question because you are opening a door for him.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to look at it and he's going to find a bracket. in a matter of seconds, and I mean like 15, 20, 25 seconds, he will say something like, well, I can see right away we're not at level 1, 2, or 3, because that's the top of the scale, and we're having a lot of trouble. So, okay, great. So he got it down to 4, 5, 6, 7. And you say, well, why don't you just go ahead and read the text, and then you can get it exactly. And he's going to want to do that because you're helping him. So he reads it, he comes back, and he says, well, now that I read it, I can see we're at level 5. No wonder we're having all this trouble. That's near the bottom of the scale. See, that's an insight. And he'll say, that explains why when she does this, I do this. So any human problem, difficulty, or dilemma can successfully be analyzed by one or more of these scales. So he found his level on the scale of relationships. And then you say to him, Alex, now look at this. And you open it to the scale of sexuality. Because that's relevant, isn't it? This is his girlfriend. So he looks at it and says, you mean there's a scale of sexuality? You say, yeah. You don't have to tell me if you don't want, but where are you on this scale? For your own illumination, where are you? So he looks at it, and he's going to say, he's going to find a bracket in a matter of seconds, right there on the spot. He's going to say something like, well, I can see it. I'm definitely not 6 or 7. That's got nothing to do with it. Okay, fine. So he got it down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So he said, well, go ahead and read it, and then you can get it exactly. So he reads it. He knows who he is, and he'll realize he's at, for example, level 4. And that explains what's going on. But he might also realize that his girlfriend is at level 5. And if that's true, that relationship is not going to work. Now, he might be able to move her from 5 up to 4, and they would be compatible. But if he's at 4 and she's at 5, they're cooked and not proceed. And this is what you see sometimes with a couple. They're both good-looking, smart, congenial, successful people, but they cannot have a romantic relationship. It doesn't work. They can stay friends, they can be business partners, because they're at conflicting levels on that scale. And it's an insuperable barrier. So, when you have any type of problem, difficulty, try to find the one that works the best. You might miss on the first try. You might say to your friend Alex, look at the scale of control. He says, well, I don't see how this fits with our relationship. Okay, fine. Let's look at the scale of personal influence. He looks at this. Oh, yeah, this makes sense. And he'll see that there are 7 types of human influence, and he's at one level, she might be at a completely different level, and he'll understand it, then it'll explain the whole situation, you see? So when you have a complex relationship like this, you might have 15, 20 scales that are applicable. And every time the guy correctly finds either his level or his spouse's level or his girlfriend's level, he has an insight. So he's unraveling this Gordian knot. And at some point, it's all going to be clear to him and he will know how to proceed. And so he might say, I'm going to get this book and I'm going to show it to Millie and we're going to use this to improve our levels. That could happen. Or he might say, you know what? I'm done with Millie. This is a waste of my time. This can't possibly work. And if that happens, he will not be upset about that. He'll be relieved. He'll say, thanks, Joey, for showing me this because you got me out of this big mess. Because remember, every time you find a level, you have an insight, and it's a positive experience. It's a pleasant thing to say, now I understand why she does that. That is a pleasant experience always. So whatever he decides to do with it, that's up to him, but it's going to be a good outcome. It's always a good outcome if you use Septemics. Mm-hmm. So for example, sometimes I bump into a guy who I can see is really low on some scale, at or near the bottom. And I say, okay, thank you very much. Have a nice day. Goodbye. Mm-hmm. Not going to get into it because it's going to be a train wreck. So other people who don't have that insight might get involved with this person and wind up with a train wreck. But this is a month later or 2 months later or a year later, and they might wind up losing a lot of money. Like Billy Joel, who had his brother-in-law handling his money, and his brother-in-law stole $1 million from him. So Billy obviously did not have the insight to see that. You know, when I was a teenager, my father was a businessman. He could see I was a very straight kid. He had me handling money for him when I was a teenager because he saw that I would do whatever he told me to do. Like he'd say, now I'm going on a cruise and Mrs. Smith is going to come here every Tuesday with an envelope and you take the money and put it in the drawer. So, okay. And I did it because he could sort of see, because he knew me well, that I would do that. I didn't touch the money. I didn't spend a dime of it. See, there are some people who can't be trusted that way. They will abscond with your money. So you need to have the insight to see, who is this person? Is this guy an upscale person or a downscale person? And again, you'll have a person who's upscale on some things and downscale on other things. We see this all the time. We have some guy who he's physically fit. He has a lot of money. He is successful in business, but he can't get a date. Women don't like him. So on some scale, like maybe his professional scale, the scale of human ability is very high. On the scale of physical fitness, he's very high. On the scale of sexuality, he might be very low. See, we don't know because we have to really get into the specifics. In Septemics, there is no one size fits all. Every person is unique. Every situation is unique. And that is why this is valuable to you, because it gets you to find the specifics. What is the deal with Jerry? What's going on with him? Why is he not doing his job? You analyze Jerry and you will find it. You might find him on 5 or 6 different scales and see exactly what's going on. And when you find him, you might be able to move him up to a higher level, because it's not hard to get to the highest level because it's the next level. You see, if you're at level 3, the next thing for you is level 2. So you can get there. But you can't get to level 1 from level 3 because level 2 is in the way. So it tells you a very specific way of how to help people in a way that is universally applicable. Any questions? Okay. Axiom 12. Septemics is for the use of those who wish to improve oneself and others. This is important because if you wish to improve yourself or others, this book is for you, if you can read English reasonably well. Now, that leaves out all of the people who are not interested in improving themselves or others. That would include psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, professional criminals, corrupt politicians, serial murderers, ignoramuses, morons, crazy people. There's lots of people, for whatever reason, do not have an interest in improving themselves or others. You know, when you deal with criminal types, they're not interested in improving you. They're interested in cleaning out your bank account. That's not improving you. Mm-hmm. So I've actually calculated that about half of the human race has an interest in improving oneself and or others. So the other half of the human race is not the target for this book. Mm-hmm. They probably won't read it. If they do read it, they won't understand it. And even if they do understand it, they won't apply it because it's contrary to their way of life. Mm-hmm. If you have some guy who's a wife beater and he reads Septemics, he's either going to stop beating his wife or he's going to not understand Septemics. The two cannot go together. There's not going to be a drug dealer who's a septemicist. It cannot be, because that guy is killing people. He's wrecking the lives of hundreds of people or thousands. So Septemics is not for him. The good news is this subject will not be of benefit to the people who wreck society. So some guy who's let's say, a capo in the mafia, this isn't going to help him. He's not going to benefit from this. He's not going to read it. And even if he tries, he won't understand it because he's at or near the bottom of too many scales. It's going to be gobbledygook to him. So that's actually good. So you don't have to worry about people like Hitler and Mussolini and Pol Pot benefiting from septemics. That cannot happen, will not happen. And I've been watching this for decades. So you have to be at a certain level to have some insight and then use the scale. So it's fairly well known that you may remember the movie David and Lisa from the 60s about two young people who were in an insane asylum. And one of the things in that movie that is well known in the mental health profession is that a person can never see his own insanity. He can see somebody else's insanity. That's true for everybody, all human beings, which is why you have some guy, and he's doing something really stupid. You know, he goes out, he gets drunk, he gets in his car, and he drives drunk. Sometimes he gets caught. They take his license away. They put him in jail. He pays the big fine, and he goes out and does it again. So something in him is making him do that aberrant behavior. Now, almost everybody around him, the mother, the father, the sister, the brother, the uncle, the aunt, can all see this is not smart. And some of them might say to him, look, Joe, if you want to get drunk, take an Uber or get a designated driver, see? But there's something wrong with this guy that makes him do this. So you see, there are people they've been arrested for DUI 5, 6, 7 times, which is incredible to me that this, they really can't see it. Now, that could be with anyone. I mean, I had somebody I was trying to explain some real estate to. I know a lot about real estate, person selling real estate. I was trying to explain this. They just could not understand it. And there were other people in the room, too, who understood exactly what I was saying, what this person should do. And they understood perfectly. And this other person just couldn't get it. Mm-hmm. So that person obviously was at or near the bottom of some of these scales. So, for example, the scale of thought. If the person is at the bottom of the scale of thought or near the bottom, lots of luck. You're not going to be able to explain things to this person. You're not going to be able to explain to this person how to use AI or how to play the stock market, because that person's thinking is not up to it. There are 7 levels of human thought. And the smart people are the ones near the top of that scale, and the dopey people are the ones near the bottom of that scale. So if you're talking to somebody who's at the bottom of the scale of thought, good luck. You're not going to get anywhere. You can't explain things to those people. So those are the people who wind up getting arrested and getting beaten up because they get in fistfights, or winding up on drugs or becoming an alcoholic because they're at or near the bottom of all these scales. So reading it again, Septemics is for the use of those who wish to improve oneself and others. So I personally, knowing this material like the back of my hand, can pretty much spot people who want to improve themselves or others. It's not hard to do. So I could look at a person and say, I can see this person wants to improve himself and wants to help others too. This person is a candidate for Septemics. People who are not like that, who I bump into occasionally, I bumped into some organized crime people and criminals and such. I can say, I can see these people are not interested in improving themselves or others. So I just stay away from them. And I can tell you as a young man, this material didn't exist, so obviously I didn't know it. So I made the same stupid mistakes that everybody else makes. Now that I know it, for me, that does not happen, cannot happen, will not happen. If I associate with a person, that is an upscale person. It does not mean a perfect person. It means that that person is at or near the top of many scales. Because if the person were not, I would go away politely. Any questions?
No, not at this point.
Okay, so those are the 12 axioms of Septemics. And this gives you an overview of the subject. Now, I would urge you to go to my website, which is septemics.com, where you can see what many readers have said about it, what many journalists have written about it, what the reviews are. You can read sections of the book itself. And there's even a pre-recorded introduction to Septemics that you can listen to that explains it to you in 15 minutes as a new person. So I would invite you to go there and learn about this. And if you wish to improve yourself and or others, this will help you. The ebook is very cheap, as all ebooks are. You can get it for $10, download it, and you can start fixing your life right away.
Okay. Here we go. All right. So go to septemics.com to learn about the scales that we actually did a couple weeks ago, and today with the axioms. And if you have questions for Jim, you can reach him through the Septemics website, and he'll be happy to help you in every which way understand where you are in your life and where you can go, and the directions that can lead you towards a better life. Jim, thank you as always for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Joey. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, and of course, if you want to continue the series, of course, let me know so that way we can, really continue the series on it. We are now, believe it or not, as Jim was going through everything, and I was doing little side things, so I apologize. But at the same time, I was checking in to see if there was any questions that were coming up, and of course, there were visitors that came on, but they went off during that time too, so I couldn't say something in between in reference to if they had questions or anything. But we are up to the when we did the original podcast itself, we did a preview of the Septemics. We did Septemics, which was 5 hours. And then today with the axioms, we are now tied with the most podcasts for a Scleroderma Town Hall I did. So we're up to 4 in reference to that. So I just wanted to bring that out as an excitement thing, because, hopefully people took some interest to it to, really want to look into it. And so hopefully, people come out to the Septemics website and say, Jim, I saw you on the Life with Joey Calvo podcast, and I have a question about this. And like I said, Jim will answer everything possible. So, Jim, like I said, thank you for coming on the podcast. He knows he's welcome anytime. I don't need to repeat that. And I thank all of you for watching the Life with Joey Calvo podcast as well. God bless you all.
Thanks, Joe. Bye.
Bye-bye now.